American Vampire 1976, written by Scott Snyder, art by Rafael Albuquerque. Alright, American Vampire 1976, the epic conclusion to Scott Snyder's long vampire tale. And I am happy to report there is, in fact, a definitive ending that wraps up all the storylines quite nicely at the end of this volume, so that is great. Now, when this series first started, I think it was one of the best horror vampire books I've ever read. And when I compare it with other vampire movies and TV, I would put American Vampire probably at the top. But as the series went on, it went from being this smaller scale horror vampire book to being this kind of world-ending stakes X-Men kind of book, except they're vampires, but they're kind of like X-Men and they have powers. It kind of divulged into that. And it, I feel, jumped the shark at some point. Especially when we started introducing the Grey Trader and the Beast and the Izkaku weapon. It started getting a little bit too high concept and convoluted for my liking. And I think a lot of readers bailed on this series along the way at some point. But for those of us that are still around, we're not going to go back to the way things were in the first few volumes, but Scott Snyder is embracing the craziness, and we are going to have ourselves a pretty big, epic battle with the Beast and the Izkaku and the Grey Trader and Skinner Sweet and the VMS and everybody. And it is quite exciting. It's kind of like Fast and the Furious meeting vampires in a way. It's just kind of dumb, action, fun entertainment. And it's still a good time. So let's dive into it. American Vampire 1976 and see how Scott Snyder ends this epic vampire tale. Part 1. Don't Look Behind You. In Volume 8, Skinner Sweet was infected by the Beast's people and was going to turn into one of the Beast's slaves. But Skinner, he was in space on a convoluted mission with Calvin Poole and had to ride the outside of a spaceship from space back down to Earth. And while he was doing that, apparently the sun's unfiltered rays in Earth's upper atmosphere burned away whatever infection Skinner had from the Beast, so he was no longer infected. But it also burned away what made Skinner Sweet an American vampire. He even tried to pour American Vampire blood back into his eyes and turn back into an American vampire, but it didn't work. So now in 1976, Skinner Sweet is a mortal man, a human, and he can now die. But Skinner Sweet, he still lives life dangerously. Skinner is working as a stuntman, kinda like Evel Knievel. Skinner, to the public, is supposedly the grandson of the original Skinner Sweet, the Wild West outlaw. Of course, we all know he is the same Skinner Sweet, the same Wild West outlaw still alive. Skinner, for his stunt at this show he is performing at, he is on a motorcycle performing in front of a crowd. He drives up a ramp. He jumps through a flaming hoop, and then he has to shoot a small target. Otherwise, this ramp won't open up and he'll drive right into some spikes. Skinner, he successfully pulls it all off, though. After the show, Skinner goes to the rednecks who are running this stunt show he's performing at, and they refuse to pay him. They have a gun, and they complain that their albino alligator has gone missing, and maybe they suspect Skinner took it. Skinner tells them to pay him what they owe. He goes to escalate things, but he backs off a bit when one of the guys there reaches for his gun. Elsewhere in Alaska, Felicia Book, who is now vice director of the VMS, she's no longer prime director, she is conducting some sort of experiment. We see a little baby Brune on her shoulder. Brune was a Homo abominus ally of Felicia back in previous volumes, and he died in the last volume. His head literally got cut off. But I guess he can regrow himself or something. I can't help but feel that Scott Snyder is ripping off Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy here with a baby Brune, just like we had baby Groot in those movies. Elsewhere, in New York City, human vampire hunter Travis Kidd is still killing vampires. He is in a nightclub and appears to be working as a DJ spinning some disco tunes. Travis is visited by American Vampire, vassals of the Morning Star agent Calvin Poole. Calvin wants Travis's help to track down this new serial killer named the Peeling Man, who has apparently been going around killing VMS agents, both past and present. This Peeling Man appears to maybe be working for the Tongue, which is this organization that worships the Beast and works with the Grey Trader. Calvin suspects that the Beast has been making more Tongue members over the last several years, and the Beast is looking for a species to bond with to take form. Calvin also hints at something that happened to Gus in the past. He tells Travis, "Damn it! Before what happened with Gus, you were the best vampire tracker and killer around. I'm asking you to help me take down whoever this Peeling Man is. But if this shitty music and lasers is your life now, then just say so and I'll leave you to it." Travis tells Calvin, "It's not a laser, you idiot. It's a solar lamp." Travis, he flips a switch and it lights up the nightclub with this solar light. And apparently lots of the people in this club are actually Carpathian vampires, and they start burning up. Back to Skinner's suite. He is in his underground bunker, his hideout, that is actually an old train car that him and his crew stole in the Wild West days. Skinner, he is petting that albino alligator, he totally stole it. And those rednecks that were running the show that he performed at, well, they have somehow tracked him down back to his train car, and they get into his hideout, and they attack Skinner. Skinner, he's human now, he might actually die here. Skinner goes to grab his gun and shoot at them, but before he can, he takes a baseball bat, swing to his head, and goes down. In the old days when Skinner was an American vampire, he would easily destroy these guys. But now as a human, he struggles. No matter though, American Vampire and current head of the VMS, Pearl Jones, who prefers to go by Pearl Preston, she shows up just in the nick of time and manages to save Skinner. She kills the rednecks by slashing at them with her claws and decapitating them. By the way, a huge cliche we've seen over and over and over again in American Vampire is a character is about to die, but oh no, some random other character shows up in the last minute to save them. We've seen this so many times in the series so far, and we will continue to see it a few more times throughout the course of this video. The two of them talk, Pearl and Skinner. She asks Skinner if he really went to go see the Tongue to be made immortal again? And Skinner answers, "Hell yes I did. You don't know what this is like, being mortal, wearing your body like a frickin' watch, tick tick tick, the sand blowing over you, you don't remember, you don't even..." Skinner, he yells at her to leave, get out of his train hideout thing. But Pearl tells Skinner that she needs his help to rob a train. Skinner, after all, is an expert. His hideout is literally an old train he stole. The train that they need to rob is called the Freedom Train. Pearl explains that to celebrate the bicentennial, President Gerald Ford approved and authorized a ceremonial train to cross the country carrying important pieces of American history. Things like Judy Garland's red ruby slippers, Edison's light bulb, and Abe Lincoln's hat, among many other things. 15 trains of priceless Americana. One of the artifacts contains a map, and that map will have the meeting place to the Council of Firsts. We've heard mention of these Council of Firsts in other volumes of American Vampire. They are kind of like the very first vampires in the world, and they formed this council. But they are enemies to the Carpathian vampires, as well as to the Tongue, as well as to the vassals of the Morning Star. But dire circumstances require the VMS and this Council of Firsts to perhaps work together. Pearl says that the last time her and Skinner fought together, they retrieved the Iskaku weapon, which was the head of this weird gigantic creature thing. Well, Felicia, she planted the skull of that creature where it should have bloomed into something called the Blood of Light. And that's supposedly the only thing that can kill the beast. Well, it's not working. So, she needs to find this Council of Firsts and ask them how to fix the garden. Skinner tells her it's a pipe dream to steal this train. He says they will need more people who know these trains and know the old ways. Pearl replies, "Funny you should say that because I found one other person to help us. Come on down." And entering the hideout, I assume he was just like standing outside for this entire conversation until Pearl could finally make the dramatic introduction. And then he begins climbing down the train car, and it is James Book himself, alive once again. Oh shit! Mind exploding, James Book alive again? What the F? James Book, he died in Volume 1. So for him to come back so deep into the series is a real big twist for sure. Part 2, The Stuff of Legends. Now we get the explanation of how James Book is alive again. So let me give a little history lesson. So James Book's family took Skinner Sweet in when they were kids, because Skinner's family died. So James Book and Skinner Sweet kind of became adopted brothers. Later on in life, Skinner became a Wild West outlaw, and James Book became a lawman who would try and arrest Skinner Sweet. In Volume 1, Skinner Sweet killed James Book's fiancée, Ella. Skinner explains now that it's okay though, she was only after James Book's land. I think this is a way for Skinner Sweet, as well as for Scott Snyder, to justify to us, the readers, that Skinner killing James Book's fiancée is kind of okay. Maybe even a sympathetic act to James Book. James Book in Volume 1, he then arrested Skinner Sweet and his gang, and in the process, they both became American vampires. Skinner Sweet first, and then Skinner infected James Book. When the confrontation was over, James Book, he didn't want to live that way anymore. He didn't want to live as a vampire. So he got Abelina Book to shoot him in the head with a golden bullet in exchange for banging her and giving her a child. That child ended up being Felicia Book. We always assumed that that was that, and James Book was dead. But apparently, when Abelina became an agent of the VMS many years later, one day, she stole some of the most ancient blood in the world from the VMS's vaults in Cairo, and she used that blood to bring James Book back to life. Going way back to American Vampire issue 34, which was in my Volume 5 Part 2 video, we saw Abelina. She had a creature in her basement, although we didn't really know who or what that creature was. Well, we know now that that creature was James Book. It took years in Abelina's basement for James Book to heal. But by the time James Book was well and looking human again and not a disgusting monster, Abelina had died and passed on. But James Book, he decided to join the VMS, and continue doing what he loved best, becoming a lawman once again. In the last few years, he has been working with Pearl Jones in the VMS as her partner. That pretty much brings us up to the current day in 1976. Skinner, Pearl, and James Book are in Arizona, and they need to steal that freedom train. Skinner has a plan. It's something that his gang used to do a lot in the old days, stealing a train car. There are apparently pocket tunnels inside this overpass tunnel. They will get on the train, remove the train car that they need, and hit a switch, and that train car they removed will go down a different path within the tunnel, away from the front of the train. So that's the plan. The three of them lower down onto the moving train. Skinner, he disconnects the train car that they need, the one where they think the artifact is. He shoots and hits the switch that is needed, and the train car goes down a different path. So far, the mission is going successfully. Elsewhere in New York City, Calvin Poole and Travis Kidd, they go to see an Italian-American vampire hunter named Marcel Moroni. They park outside his apartment. Moroni waves from them from up above his window. He'll be down soon. Calvin and Travis, they wait in their car. Travis tells Calvin about Gus, about when Gus was taken. He says that the two of them were friends. And Travis, he let Gus be a kid, let him do fun things. One day when they were hanging out together, Travis, he left the room just for a second to get the buzzer for the door, and all of a sudden they were swarmed, and there were too many of them. Then there was nothing he could do, and they took Gus. Gus was taken by the tongue, taken to the beast. As the two wait in the car, Moroni, that Italian-American vampire hunter guy, his severed foot lands down on the car below. Calvin and Travis, they run upstairs, and they see that this peeling man, this serial killer that Calvin mentioned earlier, seems to have killed this Moroni and flayed his skin. Travis and Calvin wonder, how whoever killed Moroni, how did they kill him so fast? They just saw Moroni by the window moments ago, and now his skin is all flayed and he's dead. Calvin suspects that it wasn't the tongue. The tongue is trying to keep a low profile right now. Calvin suspects that it is an ancient enemy of theirs, an enemy capable of mind control, and it was trying to get the tongue's attention by killing all of these VMS agents and show that he is on their side. Calvin suspects it is Dracula. Dracula is back. Now, we assumed Dracula died in the Lord of Nightmares miniseries. He was killed by Lyndon Hobbs, who blew up the boat that was transporting him, and it caused Dracula to drown in that boat at the bottom of the ocean. But it looks like Dracula is being brought back into the story now. Over in Washington, D.C., Special Agent Bixby appears to be working for the Secret Service, guarding President Gerald Ford. Agent Bixby used to work for the VMS, but we learned that he was a rogue agent and was secretly a traitor and was working for the Tongue and the Beast and the Grey Traitor all along. We learn now, though, it's a little bit more complicated, though. Bixby, he leaves Gerald Ford's office, and the Grey Traitor confronts him. They talk. The Grey Traitor conveniently exposition dumps everything we need to know. That apparently the Tongue have been secretly building their army across America for years. They put the Beast's milk into America's water supply, and tens of thousands of people are now infected and work for the Tongue secretly. Some don't even realize it because they haven't been activated yet. Sort of like a Manchurian Candidate situation. In 7 days' time, the Beast's army will burst from the earth and begin taking it over. There are underground tunnels all over the world. The only one who can stop them is apparently the little boy Gus for some reason, which is why they kidnapped him and hidden him away. Now Bixby, he works for the beasts, but a part of him wants to maybe warn Gerald Ford about the oncoming threat, wants to maybe set things right and give humanity a chance and stop working for the bad guys. But the Grey Trader convinces Bixby to continue with the plan and stay hidden a little while longer and keep quiet. And Bixby, he seems willing to do so, willing to play his part as the Grey Trader embraces him. Back over to Skinner Suite, Pearl and James' book. They are in that train car that they separated, and they are looking at all of the Americana artifacts. They believe the map to the Council of the Firsts could be written on the back of George Washington's farewell address, because the Founding Fathers apparently had dealings with the VMS. Now I know what you're thinking. Is this like the Nicolas Cage movie National Treasure, where they had to steal the Declaration of Independence because there was a secret map on the back of it? And yes, this is exactly like that.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
As the three of them continue looking, though, some guards show up, and they are secretly members of the Tongue. And they, get this, and they apparently have 30 more of them as backup, just waiting outside the train car. How did the Tongue know that Skinner, Sweet, and his crew were going to attempt to rob this train right now at this very exact spot? And how did they know to be ready with 30 guards? I think it's a little ridiculous, but I guess this just shows how vast the Tongue's reach is within America. Part 3: Beneath the Greenhouse. Felicia Book is with Brune and is visited by other VMS agent named Joel the Mummy. Joel retrieved something called ghoul flesh. He has a severed face from this ghoul. A ghoul is a homo abominus from the 5th century, and apparently these ghouls can mimic the flesh of someone. So essentially now Felicia has a face maker like they did in the Mission Impossible movies. You know, where they would have this machine to make faces, and then they would wear the faces, and then they would rip off the faces. I love Mission Impossible and that face thing. Anyway, Felicia has that now. On the train, Skinner, Pearl, and James' Book are fighting off the members of the Tongue, who have been equipped with guns with golden bullets. They fire on Pearl and James, and both of them fall down injured. Skinner, though, he fires back on these Tongue members, and his bullets are apparently laced with salt, which the Tongue are weak to. Skinner, Pearl, and James' Book grab Washington's farewell address, which has the map on the back, and they make their way to one of Rockefeller's old limos that happens to be on the train. They use that limo and drive through the train car and away. Skinner, he also stole Abraham Lincoln's hat and is now wearing it, which is quite funny, I must say. They drive their car through the train tunnels, trying to get away from the Tongue. The Tongue have their own cars, though, somehow. The Tongue in their cars are chasing after Skinner and his crew. James' Book is shooting at them. Skinner, he throws Betsy Ross's flag. That's the American flag that has less stars because it's really old. He throws the flag out the driver's side window, and it lands on one of the cars pursuing them, blocking the windshield. And that car crashes. Skinner, he then lights some dynamite and gives it to Pearl and tells her to throw it out her window at the other car. Pearl, she throws the dynamite and succeeds, and she takes out the other car that was chasing them. Skinner continues driving the car in the train tunnel, but the tracks lead to a dead end, and Skinner drives right off a high cliff, and the car falls into the water below. The three of them get out of the car, and they start drifting down these rapids. Elsewhere, back in New York City, Kelvin and Travis Kidd are walking through the subway tunnels of New York, heading to the VMS's old New York headquarters. The first one, which we saw in a previous volume of American Vampire, was at the Museum of Natural History, and it served as a research facility. Well, this other facility, this other headquarters under the tunnels of New York, was more of a laboratory. The two of them, they walk through a now abandoned VMS facility. They theorize that the Carpathians hate the tongue as much as they do, but Dracula, who is king of the Carpathians, he must be secretly trying to make a deal with the tongue. Eventually, Dracula sneaks up behind them and stabs Travis Kidd through his chest with his long claws. Oh shit! Dracula alive in the flesh! Calvin shoots at Dracula with the crossbow, but Dracula catches it, and then he grabs Calvin and tosses him aside. Dracula gets closer to Calvin. He's going to bite into him, but then Travis bites into Dracula's neck with his wooden fangs he sometimes likes to wear. Dracula tosses Travis back. Travis comments that Dracula tasted like shit. Dracula, he gloats and taunts them both. He says, "I am eternal. I am the Lord of Vampires, the first Carpathian." And then, in a recurring cliche, like I mentioned earlier, Mimite, the Native American vampire. She shows up, she sneaks in, and she slices off Dracula's head, killing him like it's nothing. Dracula, he was brought back for one issue, for the sole purpose of putting Mimite over. In wrestling, putting someone over refers to the act of a wrestler losing to another wrestler so as to boost the winning wrestler's profile and hype them up for the future. Usually an old retiring wrestler will do this for the new wrestler whose career is just starting off. They'll put them over. Well, that is exactly what Dracula did here for Mimite. He put her over. Now she is the badass chick that killed Dracula. Mimite, further hyping up her badassery, she says, "You may be the first Carpathian fiend, but me, my name is Mimite, and I am the original American vampire." Part 4, Answered Prayers. The VMS are all in a private plane, on their way to meet the Council of the Firsts. The Council of the Firsts are made up of progenitors of the original bloodlines, responsible for all later species of Homo habilis. They are enemies of the Carpathians as well as the tongue, and sometimes the VMS in the past. The VMS wants to see if the Council of Firsts can help them activate the Iskaku weapon and get the blood of light to flow so that they can defeat the tongue. The fate of the world is in the balance. They suspect within a week the beast and tongue will rise up and make their move. On the plane is Pearl Jones, Skinner Sweet, James Book, Travis Kidd, Calvin Poole, and new addition Mimite. Flying the plane is Felicia Book with a baby Brune. George Washington's farewell address did in fact contain the location of the Council of the Firsts. It is hidden in the unclimbable side of the Matterhorn mountain bordering Switzerland and Italy. Elsewhere in the White House, President Gerald Ford is talking with Agent Bixby. They are in the White House kitchen. A chef brings in some ice cream for Gerald Ford to eat. The chef appears to be secretly a member of the tongue. The ice cream is probably the milk of the beast, and if Ford eats it, he will become infected. Agent Bixby seems to still be wrestling on if he should warn Ford and the world about the oncoming attack. Bixby thinks about the armies of the tongue rising up from the earth on the upcoming July 4th. For now, though, Bixby, he stays quiet. Back on the plane, Travis goes to visit Felicia and Brune up in the cockpit. Travis has the severed head of dead Dracula in a box, and he is carrying it around like a trophy. He knows that Felicia and her son Gus had a history with Dracula, so he figured that she would maybe take comfort in Dracula's death. But even though Dracula is dead and his decapitated head is in a box, Dracula, he still has some residual power in him, and he is attracting bats to the plane. An army of bats fly into the plane and into the plane's propellers, and it causes enough damage that the plane needs to make an emergency crash landing. The plane approaches the Matterhorn Mountain. The Matterhorn Mountain is the location where the hidden base of the Council of the First should be. It's somewhere there in the rock face, and Felicia decides that they need to crash land right into that rock face and just hope that the entrance to the Council of First space is there. Skinner thinks Felicia is being insane, but Pearl holds Skinner back. But Felicia, she manages to land the plane successfully and crash it right through the hidden rock face of the mountain, and it lands in the secret lair there. All of them exit the plane and look around, and they see these huge chairs. The place looks abandoned, like it hasn't been used for decades or centuries. But then they hear some loud growling, and they are face to face with these gigantic monsters known as the Mad Giants. Part 5: The Big Lie. Skinner and crew battle these Mad Giants for a bit, but Travis drops Dracula's head, and it rolls on the mountain floor until it is eventually picked up by what looks like a small vampire child. The vampire child appears to be the leader of the Council of Firsts. The members of the Council of Firsts we see here are Homer, Didi, Ubera, Dizura, and G. Each of them are in their human form for now, but they each have a more bestial vampire form. Didi welcomes them to the Council of the Firsts, and he accepts their gift of Dracula's head. Didi looks at Dracula's head and says, "It is hard to look upon, the head of my own fallen son, the one who was supposed to revive our line, but instead turned against us all. My name for him was Ensi, and in the old tongue, the Lord of New Fields." So I think this little kid vampire, or Didi, was Dracula's dad, maybe? Didi is willing to hear them out, but he tells them, "First, one of you must die." Elsewhere in Colorado, Joel the Mummy, using the ghoul facemaker, he goes into a Colorado Air Force base and disguises himself as one of the technicians there. And he gives one of the other employees there a floppy disk with various doomsday scenarios they need to train on. He then leaves. This will, I assume, pay off much later. Back to the Council of Firsts. One of the council members, this one named Didi, now in his vampire form, he says one of Pearl's group has lain with the beast. The stink is on them. This is why one of them must die. The council members think it is Skinner, or maybe James Book. The stench is coming from around the two of them. Pearl, she tells them that they have to move past this. They are all in this together. The beast will rise in America in a few days, and they need to get the blood of light to flow from the Iskaku weapon. Without it, they will all be dust, even the Council of Firsts. Didi asks Pearl, "Do you know anything about our history with your homeland America, the nest of the beast?" Pearl explains no. Didi gives Pearl and the rest of them a history lesson. The Council of Firsts are some of the oldest living creatures alive. For eons, they kept the beast at bay and the tongue subdued, all while the humans and the vassals of the Morning Star hunted them. The Council of Firsts came to America to seek new opportunity. They made a deal with the Founding Fathers, especially George Washington. The deal was that the Council of Firsts would fight for America in the Revolutionary War against the British. They would help them win the war. And after the war, George Washington would give them refuge. But when the war was over, Washington seemed to renege on their deal and ignored them, and their contribution to the war effort was forgotten. And over the next 100 years, the Carpathians were welcomed to America, and the VMS, and all the Council's enemies. So because of this, the Council of Firsts does not really care, and are not too fond of America. One of the other vampire creatures there, named G, explains that every time the beast has been beaten back, it releases a toxin in its milk, and when it is suckled by its followers after the conflict, they forget the recent past, allowing the beast to retreat and rebuild until the next conflict. G says, beings like us, we were born not long after the First Great War, in which the traitor, as the hero Huron, led the forces of good against the beast and its minions. The blood of Huron's armies mixed, the blood of light, the blood of the beast, and the blood of darkness, and the first monsters were born, our forebearers, the ancients. To know all this, to remember it, is to understand that this battle of good and evil, it connects us through the eons. We remember, but humans, they always strive to forget the past. And America, we cannot help them anymore. Dee Dee explains that their plan is to not help, let the beast and the tongue kill all the humans, and eventually, once the beast has devoured everyone and becomes weak again, then they will wake the ancients, the oldest of all the vampires that are hidden all over the world. The ancients, with the Council of Firsts, will fight the beast back once again. Skinner, reading George Washington's farewell address, interprets it, though, as an apology to the Council of Firsts. He says, well, it's a fact, at the time Washington wrote this thing, most of the country wanted him to take a third term in the Oval. They wanted a single take, like you said about the beast. But instead, old George, he wrote this, which was his way of making sure America would never be any one person's take. Don't you get it? He wrote it on here as an apology to y'all. The Council of First thinks it is nonsense what Skinner is saying. Mimite, she argues that, sure, America is shitty. She's a Native American, and the Americans were not kind to her people. She says, America is a fitting home for the beast, but her and the people here, the VMS, that if they all work together, they can fight to make for a better tomorrow. Here, there, and everywhere. Pearl, she pleads with the Council of Firsts to tell them how to use the Iskaku, how to get the blood of light to activate. Skinner, he also asks if, there's a way he can be made immortal again, be made a vampire. Dee Dee explains to Skinner, there is no way to make you immortal once the beast's blood infects you. The blood of light, on the other hand, it requires tremendous fortitude to accept it. Huron, he had a mix of bloodlines in him when he took it in, ancient and modern. The mix strengthens your system. The boy chosen, he was made a vampire in a mysterious way, also with multiple bloods. Felicia jumps in when she hears, the boy chosen? She exclaims, Gus? Skinner infected him. It was right after Skinner had been fighting vampires, so there would have been traces of other blood in his. If you remember to an earlier volume where they were explaining all about the beast, we learned of this hero named Huron who fought the beast back. He eventually became the Grey Traitor. But Huron, he was the key to fighting the beast. And apparently this Dee Dee is explaining that Huron had this mixture of all these different kind of ancient bloods, and somehow that made him susceptible to the Iskaku weapon, and that's what helped him in his battle with the beast. Well, apparently Gus has a similar mixture of blood, and could be potentially very dangerous to the beast. But to Dee Dee, he points at James' book and says that there is another among you with the fortitude. James' book, He also has a strange mixture of blood in him, and he may also be able to receive the blood of light from the Iskaku weapon. James' book explains, "Oh, the ancient blood that Abelina used to revive me. That might be the reason that I'm susceptible to this." Pearl asks Dee, "How can even James take the blood in? How do they make it flow from the Iskaku?" Dee explains, "The blood flows in the presence of one who can accept it." So this is why Felicia and everyone have not been able to get anything out of this Iskaku weapon, because they never had someone that was susceptible to it around it. So now it seems like they have the key to unlocking its power. Another council member there, Dizura, she has the gift of foresight as one of her abilities. She can look into future possibilities. She does so, and she says that there is a chance that Felicia and all of them could win. Felicia asks if her son Gus is still alive in this future, and Dizura says yes. Dee, he points them towards a door and tells them to go. They will not fight alongside them, but they wish them luck. Pearl and the others all leave. Elsewhere, back in America, Gerald Ford is not feeling well. He is starting to forget things. The beast's infection from the ice cream appears to be working its way through his system. Bixby is kind of concerned. Back to the Council of Firsts. The VMS have all left, and they're alone to talk amongst themselves. Dizura admits it was a false vision she shared with them. Lying is not her strong suit. The council members there, they start smelling the beast. The scent is getting stronger and stronger, much stronger than before. And that is because the Grey Trader then walks in, right into their chambers along with several members of the Tongue. Part 6, Fire and Flame. Pearl and crew have traveled to Alaska, where the Iskaku is planted. The Iskaku, the remains of a warrior who fought the beast thousands of years ago. They are all hoping they can hopefully get its flowers to activate the blood of light by exposing it to James' book. The Iskaku is inside this iceberg, and they need to use a small submarine to get inside of it. James' book, along with Pearl and Skinner, are going to go in the submarine and go inside the iceberg to expose James' book to the Iskaku and see if anything happens. Elsewhere in America, Gerald Ford now seems to be acting strangely. He seems to maybe be under the Tongue's control now. Right now he's supposed to give a speech on taxes and whatnot, but he knows nothing he does really matters anymore. The beast will rule the world soon. Back at the iceberg, Pearl, Skinner, and James used the submarine. They went underwater, and they came up into the iceberg, where we see the Iskaku has been planted. There's a big skull in the background, and some flowers are sprouting around. When James' book gets closer to the flowers, they sprout open. James' book, he removes his shirt. He pulls out a gold knife. All that is left is for him to cut into himself a bit and see if the blood in his body will react to the Iskaku flower and activate this blood of light. Now, James' book, he's about to cut into himself, but then he stabs Pearl with the golden knife. Skinner runs over to Pearl and holds her. He then looks at James and asks him why. James' book has secretly been working for the Tongue and the Beast the entire time since he came back to life. James' book explains because, like Skinner, he's changed. When Abelina stole the blood from the VMS vault to raise him from the dead, what she didn't know was that the blood she used came from the old days, when the Beast's armies ruled the world, before the Great War. Nothing of the old James book's weaknesses remained when he came back to life. No love, no sympathy. The blood had altered his body and mind. Skinner goes to attack James, but James slices at Skinner's suite with that knife, knocking him back. James reveals that he led the Grey Trader and the Tongue right to the Council of Firsts location. So once they left, that is why the Grey Trader showed up there. The Council of Firsts might all be dead now. We see outside the iceberg, where Felicia and the others are waiting on their boat. They too get attacked. A harpoon goes right through Mimete's body, and she gets pulled into the ocean. And several boats filled with the armies of the Tongue arrive. They fire rockets on Felicia's boat, and it causes a huge explosion. James' book tells Skinner he knows Skinner didn't go see the Grey Trader to become immortal again. He went there with his gun to try and kill him, cause he had a death wish. James' book, he mocks Skinner some more and gloats, and then he lights some dynamite and leaves it behind for it to kill Skinner and Pearl as he walks away. Part 7, Interlude, Family Trees. This issue is an anthology issue, featuring a bunch of short stories. Some of them are a little bit important. The first short story is about George Washington. Now, we learned that George Washington made this pact with the Council of Firsts, that they would help America win the Revolutionary War, and in exchange, they would be given refuge in America. Well, the night before George Washington was supposed to meet the Council of Firsts and make arrangements to fulfill his side of the bargain, Washington, in his bedroom, was visited by the Grey Trader. But the Grey Trader was impersonating Washington's dead son, Jack Custis. The Grey Trader, as Washington's dead son, attempts to scare his dad out of the meeting. He tells his father that this land, it has already been claimed by another, a beast much more suited to this soil, much more powerful. He says that if Washington goes forward with the meeting, it will doom them all. The Grey Trader, he leaves, and Washington, he decides to postpone his meeting with the Council of Firsts for just one day. But on that day where he postponed it, he got sick of a cold and died, and the meeting never happened, and Washington never fulfilled his end of the bargain. The second short story takes place in May 1973 in New York City. Pearl Jones and James' book are working together. They travel to the 78th floor of an office building to meet the VMS's new bookkeeper. Her name is May Bunting. She is of course related to Will Bunting, the VMS's first bookkeeper and author of Bad Blood. May seems to be more of a distant relation though. She's not like a daughter or a granddaughter or something. Because technology has advanced so much since the early days, she keeps the VMS's entire history in a microprocessor now, and it all fits inside this briefcase. Pearl and James, they read some information that they came there to read, but then the office tower they are in gets attacked by some Carpathian vampires, and the three of them have to fight their way past them. The third short story takes place in 1970 in Florida around Christmas. Gus and Travis are living together. Travis is taking care of Gus now while Felicia is away on VMS business. Travis tells Gus about a radio transmitter in the shape of a gun they were going to give to Elvis, who's going to try to sneak it into the White House to give to Nixon. That way they can have ears in the White House and hear what's going on. Travis also gives Gus a gift, a set of wooden fangs for Gus to wear, as well as a leather jacket that says, "Bite them back." Gus, he loves it. The two of them have dreams of starting a band one day, but none of them can play instruments. So for now, Travis says that they should just practice looking cool and dancing while they can. Part 8, Death Mask. Skinner Sweet wakes up on Hope Gentry, aka the Signal Man's luxury yacht. Skinner is not dead, and neither is Pearl. The signalman's yacht is pretty fancy and big. It even has a helicopter with a helipad on it. The signalman, after all, is a famous, popular musician with plenty of gold records. Today is the 4th of July, the day the beast will emerge. James Book and the Tongue got away with Mimete. They are most likely going to try and use Mimete as a host for the beast, which is why they wanted her. Felicia, she already took off with the yacht's helicopter. No one knows where she went. Pearl tells Skinner there is a bunker, and she wants him to wait out the apocalypse in the bunker, just in case the beast succeeds. Herself, though, she is going to try and fight the beast. Legend has it, the beast is weakest when it emerges in its human form. The signalman, he sent out a secret message on the radio a day or so ago, calling every available Homo habilis species from across the country that can fight, telling them to come to Las Vegas to make a final stand against the beast. Travis, he did some crazy shit while Skinner's suite was knocked out. 2 days ago, he took a syringe and inserted it into Dracula's decapitated head that he has been carrying around. He extracted some blood from the head and injected himself with it, and then he died. His body is in a coffin below deck. If he comes back, he will be the new Dracula, and he might be able to control the Carpathians and make the Carpathians aid them in their battle. Skinner says, "Shit, Travis, he might come back evil." Skinner comments how crazy all of this is. Skinner wants Pearl to join him in the bunker and wait this out. But Pearl replies, "No, Skinner, I'm going to stay, and you're going to go. But before you do, I'm sorry I doubted your motives for seeing the Gray Traitor, and I want to thank you for doing what you did, and for all the times you've gone against your better judgment, all of them. But most of all, I want to thank you for proving me right." Pearl, she then kisses Skinner. Then Skinner tells her, You were never right. Not about me, not about a goddamn thing. You've always been wrong, just like I was about you. See, I made you because I thought you were strong and fierce and that we could be a new breed together. But now I see you for what you are, weak. And I'm sorry I ever frickin' made you. Goodbye, Dolly, and go to hell. Elsewhere in the Beast's lair, James Book has Mimete on a chain, and he walks her to the Beast. We see the Gray Traitor standing there with Gus by his side. James Book kneels in front of the Beast. Moments from now, they will use undercover Tongue members to shut off power to Las Vegas at the Hoover Dam, and then they will rise and take over the world. Mimete, she is about to be engulfed by the Beast. Before she does, though, she whispers to Gus, "We're going to bite them back. Just follow my lead. You'll know when." The mouth of the Beast stabs into Mimete and feeds on her a bit, but the Beast has to release her. Mimete has somehow tainted her blood. The Gray Traitor informs James Book that the Beast will have to bond with him now. James Book is second in the American Vampire bloodline for now. The Beast won't be as strong as it would have been if it bonded with Mimete, but James Book will have to do. James Book seems a little apprehensive, but he eventually accepts his fate, he says. Of course, it's an honor. Mimete and Gus appear to have ran away in the confusion. Elsewhere, we see Felicia. She escaped on that helicopter, and she has gone over to Agent Bixby's apartment, and she injects him with something that makes him pass out. When Bixby wakes up, Felicia threatens to submerge him in some salt water. If Bixby is a member of the Tongue, it will kill him. Bixby claims he's not a member of the Tongue, though. He says, "Please, I'm not one of them. I was just angry at Sweet and scared, and I thought I could partner with the Tongue until he died up there in space. And then I was gonna turn on them, I swear. But then they captured me, but I'm still the same." Felicia asks Bixby for the codes for the nuclear football. Bixby says they are right there in that briefcase on his desk. Felicia, she then pulls out her ghoul facemaker mask and she disguises herself as Agent Bixby. Back to the Beast. It bonds with James Book, and everywhere across America, the armies of the Beast begin to rise. The Grey Trader exclaims, "I, the Grey Trader, proclaim our Lord has returned." Skinner, he steals one of the signalman's motorcycles and drives to the bunker. He has a flower from the Iskaku in his pocket, it appears. Skinner, he seems like he has entered the bunker. Once the bunker door closes, it ain't opening again. Skinner, he narrates, "And standing there by the hole in the sand, I knew it was all right to say goodbye to it all. To the person I tried and failed to be, but most of all to you, Pearl. I'm sorry, Dolly. I wish you the best, but this is where Skinner Sweet takes his bow and leaves you. Goes down into the soil one more time so that hopefully someday he will climb back out and ride again." Part 9. Farewell, Part 1. The armies of the Beast have risen. We see the tongue soldiers parading through the streets. They have the dead bodies of the Council of Firsts on spears. We see their leader, Dee Dee. He seems dead. Pearl and Calvin are driving downtown to confront the Beast. Travis, who has risen from the dead, is now the new Dracula, and he is in the back seat. He has his hair in a mohawk now. They finally arrive and see the newly formed Beast that has now bonded with James Book. So, we have Beast James Book now, which is kind of funny and kind of cool. It reminds me how in the Hulk comics at Marvel, how Thaddeus Ross at one point became something called the Red Hulk. Well, we got ourselves Beast James Book now. Gerald Ford is getting on Air Force One, the airplane, and Felicia, undercover as Agent Bixby, wearing the ghoul mask, is getting on the plane with him. Ford, fully under the Beast's control now, tells Bixby, "Awful lucky they are, Bixby, to be right there, to witness the birth of our true lord." Travis, as the new Dracula, adopts the name Count Travula, which makes me laugh. So I approve of the cheesy as hell name. Travula attempts to control all the Carpathians and get them to fight the Tongue. Pearl, she is driving the truck she is in full speed ahead, right into the Beast James Book. Gerald Ford, in Air Force One and now in the air flying, is informed that the Russians launched their 2,000 nukes at America, and they will hit in 3 to 7 minutes. They are going to hit everywhere, but the main focus seems to be aimed towards Las Vegas, where the Beast is. Back to Pearl. She is still driving the truck, right at Beast James Book. The Grey Trader pops up beside the truck and slashes at its tires, causing the truck to lose control and fall on its side and skid on the ground. The Grey Trader, he looks in the back of the truck, expecting to find a bomb of some sort, but he is surprised to find nothing. Skinner Sweet is riding a motorcycle and is holding the bomb that Pearl and them were going to use. That whole thing about going into the bunker last issue was a misdirection. We were led to believe that Skinner in fact went into the bunker and it closed, but he never actually did. He must have changed his mind before it closed. So Skinner on the motorcycle, he drives up a ramp with bomb in hand. He is jumping over the Beast on his motorcycle, and Calvin, Pearl, and Travula are in awe of him. Skinner throws the bomb at Beast James Book and it explodes. Skinner, he lands on the ground, falling off the bike. Beast James Book, he took in that explosion, but he seems unfazed. He gloats, "You thought that would be enough to stop me? Hello, Skinner, Pearl. Look at us all together again. Pearl, Calvin, and Travula rush James' book Beast. Skinner, he has that flower from the Iskaku in his pocket. It starts glowing, activating. Beast, James' book, blows hellfire onto Travula and Calvin. The Gray Trader grabs Pearl. Skinner Sweet has that Iskaku flower, and it somehow starts sprouting and transforms Skinner into some sort of badass looking monster. I do not understand the made-up science comic book rules for how this Iskaku affected Skinner, though. Maybe in the final issue it will be explained. But Skinner, affected by the Iskaku now, he says to James' book, "Let's end this." Part 10, Farewell, Part 2, the final issue of American Vampire 1976. Skinner and Beast James' book are squaring off. They are both giant size. James' book, puzzled about how Skinner is here, asks how. And Skinner explains, "The council did say the blood of light needs a host who's been infected by a mix of species. And between the carps and oldies and the beast itself, let's face it, I have been a big old whore this century. I partied with all kinds, and now I'm here to party with you, Jimmy." Pearl tells Skinner he has to inject his Iskaku-ridden blood into the beast's circulatory system before the beast's flesh is too tough, before he is unstoppable. So Skinner, he slashes at James' book. He draws blood. Now he needs to get his own blood into James. But James, he just grabs Skinner and tosses him at a nearby building. It looks like the two of them are like Godzilla size here. Skinner looks huge and like he took off the top half of this building here. On Air Force One, Felicia Book, as Agent Bixby, is asking Gerald Ford how he wants to respond to the Russians launching their nukes. Ford answers, "Respond? Jesus, Bixby, I can destroy them all in return, but what does it even matter? They're going to kill our Lord. With the blackout, there's no way to warn him." And Bixby, or Felicia, she says, "Actually, sir, there is. We're only 10 minutes out from Las Vegas. The missiles are still a ways away. If we fly straight there, we can warn him to go back underground until the strike passes. As for the Russians," Ford chimes in, "we'll just blow them off the map." Back to Skinner and James' book fighting. They are trading some more blows. Skinner, he grabs the Welcome to Las Vegas sign and shoves it down James' book's throat. James hits Skinner back. James' book is now standing on Skinner and getting ready to kill him. But all of a sudden, the Ancients arrive. The ancient vampires. The Gray Trader, shocked, asks, "But how?" Dee Dee, the council of the first member, who I assumed was dead impaled on the spike earlier, is actually still alive, clinging to life. He explains, We called them. We will fight you and your foul god with our last breaths," he says to the Gray Trader. Back on Air Force One, Ford is talking to his advisors on the phone, and he is preparing to launch some nukes. Felicia, as Agent Bixby, talks with Joel, who is impersonating the pilot on Air Force One. Remember back in issue 5, Joel went to a Colorado Air Force base and gave the technicians there a floppy disk. Well, that floppy disk was given to them to fool NORAD for a few minutes right now. The truth is, the Russians have not launched any nukes yet. Felicia and Joel discuss getting Gerald Ford to launch nukes at Russia as a potential last resort. If Ford launches the nukes at Russia, then Russia will for sure launch the nukes back at America, and hopefully they will destroy the beast in the process. Of course, millions will die. For now, though, Felicia tells Joel to try and scan the ground and see if they can get in contact with Pearl and the rest of them before it's too late. The ancient vampires are now triple-teaming James' book, punching him and beating him. Meanwhile, Pearl, Calvin, and Travis are all fighting the Grey Traitor. The Grey Traitor, though, starts to manipulate Travis and starts speaking to Travis in Gus's voice, as he knows Travis still feels guilty about Gus being taken. Travis doesn't know, though, that Gus is still alive and well and has escaped from the Tongue. Calvin tells Travis to not listen to the Grey Traitor. He tells him that he's trying to make Travis give in to the Carpathian blood. Travis, though, he gives in a bit, and the Carpathian vampires that used to be under Travis's control now start attacking the ancient vampires. If the ancient vampires get bitten by the Carpathians, that might be enough to infect them by the beast and turn them and make them switch to be on the beast's side in the battle. Sure enough, that's what happens. The Carpathians swarm and bite into the ancient vampires, and the ancient vampires no longer fight the beast. They have now come under his influence. Beast James' book, he recovers and turns his attention back to the others. Gus shows up on the scene. He was escaping with Mimete there, and he has arrived now. And Gus bites into Beast James' book's foot. Travis, seeing Gus alive again, snaps out of it. Back on Air Force One, Felicia as Bixby hears Gus on the radio. Gerald Ford is about to launch the nukes at Russia, but Felicia wants to call it off now. Maybe there is a chance that Gus and the others can actually win and defeat the beast. Felicia as Bixby tells Ford, "Wait, sir, the Russian attack, it's a hoax." Ford asks, "A hoax? How are you sure?" And Felicia as Bixby says it was a trick by the rebels, Felicia Book and Pearl Preston, and those rogue monsters. A nuclear strike was their last hope. The pilot, Joel, says, "Bixby's right, sir. They've taken the airport in advance of our landing." Felicia as Bixby tells Ford, "You need to get in your chute, sir. Captain Jones will take you down, and I'll land the plane myself." Ford asks, "But the rebels?" And Bixby replies, "It's okay, sir. They don't stand a chance against us." So Ford, he parachutes off the plane, and Felicia continues flying the plane directly to where the beast is. Beast James' book is staring everyone down. He gloats, "Take your little boy and your ridiculous vampire king. It's over now. The ancients, the only soldiers of yours capable of opening a wound in my flesh, they fight for me now. My minions are taking the country as we speak, and your big savior Skinner Sweet is done." Just when everything seems hopeless, though, Felicia in Air Force One is flying directly towards Beast James' book. Travis, Felicia, and Calvin hear the plane coming and begin running away. Felicia from the plane, she takes off her ghoul mask and says, "I'm sorry, son," saying that to Gus. And Gus, on the street down below, somehow seems to have heard her. And he says, "Mom? Mom?" The plane crashes right into the beast. Felicia, she died in the crash, giving her life to injure Beast James' book. Beast James' book is still currently alive, but he is injured, and he has some open wounds now. And Skinner, as the Izkaku weapon now, walks over to James. If Skinner opens a wound in himself and pours some of his own blood into James' book, then Beast James' book will die for sure. James, he tries to make a deal with Skinner, though, to not kill him. He tells Skinner to let him heal, and then he will give Skinner immortality again, and they can rule side by side. He continues, "But if you kill me, everyone tainted by my blood, and anyone near them, they'll forget, brother. Forget my influence, forget it all. So understand this, if I die, not only will you die too, but worse, no one will ever know what you did here. You'll be forgotten, your ultimate fear." Skinner to this says, "It used to be, but I guess I evolved." Skinner, he opens a wound in his wrist and pours his now yellow blood into Beast James Book's eye. The beast screams out, "Skinner!" The gray traitor yells, "What have you done?" And Beast James Book turns to stone and dies. The beast's hold across the country is gone. Most people will forget what has happened. Skinner, he also falls down. He is dying. Pearl grabs Skinner and tells him, "Skinner, listen to me. You did it. You really did it. You saved us. Right now, across the country, people might not know what happened. They might not remember how close we all came to the end, but I believe they feel it and they're grateful to you. And I'm grateful. Can you hear me, Skinner?" And Skinner says, "Almost, you're fading, but maybe." Pearl asks, "Maybe what?" Skinner continues, "Maybe if you were naked too, I could hear you better." Pearl to this replies, "I'll give you that last one, but now it's my turn. Thank you, Skinner, for giving us another chance." Skinner, with his dying last words, says, "F off, Dolly. We both know that's what you did for me," giving him another chance. Skinner, he dies. A few weeks later, Pearl, Calvin, Mimete, and Gus have a meeting with Gerald Ford, who I assume no longer remembers anything much about the beast and all of that. Pearl tells him that they are American vampires and they would like to speak about the future. The VMS appears to be out there now in the world, making a difference, and they are now once again part of the US government, and they have power and can do things. On the final page, we see Pearl enter the new headquarters of the US Department of the VMS. She enters and joins a big round table. Around the table, we see Brune, Mimete, Calvin, Travis, Gus, Trap, and a few others. Pearl tells them, "Let's get to work." Off we go. Through a letter Skinner wrote to Pearl on George Washington's farewell address, we see Skinner tell Pearl why he made her an American vampire all those many, many years ago. He says that he knew deep down to be an American vampire isn't just to be him or her, but to be both of them at once. To be an American is to be the hero, the outlaw, and the priest. It's to want it all for yourself and for everyone else. He tells her, "My original wish for you was a painless death, but if you're reading this, if you were too damn dumb to give up, then my final wish, my real wish for you as I scribble this on George Washington's big exit, is the opposite. I wish you a painful life, Dolly, the most painful. Why? Because it's the life I made for you. Now it's time for me to stop writing and for you to stop reading and to get out there. Get out there and do what you were born to. Bite this country on the frickin' neck, hard enough to hurt. And if no one knows those fang marks are yours, that's okay, because you bite deep enough. You live on in the blood. Always. We all do. In the end, that's what you taught me, Dolly. Most badass way of saying, now off we go." Skinner's letter to Pearl on George Washington's farewell address is hanging on the wall in the new VMS headquarters, framed with a candy cane in the frame there with it. And that is the end of American Vampire. Alright, so that was the end of American Vampire. And let me just say, there is lots of stuff I don't really like in this volume. I still feel it's too high concept and crazy and convoluted. Is Kaku, Grey Trader, the Beast, and how it all comes together in the end. I don't know, man. All that was a little bit nonsense to me. But I had fun. I was entertained by this story, despite its problems. Let's talk about some of the plot points that happened. So, James' book coming back to life was kind of dumb, but I really enjoyed it. I loved having him back. I loved how he became the bad guy in the end, and we had ourselves a beast James book. That's some funny stuff, man. That was good. The fact that Dracula came back as well was kind of amusing, but dumb as well. Mimete just killing him like it's nothing, and then Travis carrying around his decapitated head all volume. And then in the end, when Travis injects Dracula's blood into himself to become Dracula. Man, that is some funny stuff. So I kind of enjoyed some of that nonsense in here. Now, the final battle where James' book is now the beast and Skinner Suite becomes affected by the Iskaku. That whole Skinner Suite becoming this big Iskaku creature and being affected by the Iskaku, I didn't really buy into that. First of all, we've already established that Skinner Sweet is no longer a vampire anymore, but somehow I guess he is again because the Iskaku flower. I don't know, man. It's just nonsense stuff going on. But I did enjoy their battle where they were both big and how Skinner kills James Book in the end and how Skinner dies and we get that kind of sad ending with Skinner. And we also get some good tender moments between Skinner and Pearl in this book. So I did enjoy some of that sentimental stuff between the two of them. I liked where we ended off things in this series, how the VMS will go on and protect the future. And we had that letter from Skinner to Pearl as well. And it is now hanging in the VMS HQ. So that was a cool way to wrap up this series. And I like that we have a kind of definitive ending for this series as well. I could see Scott Snyder returning to American Vampire and continuing on the story with some of the other characters, but Skinner seems like he is dead now. So it really is kind of the end of an era for this book. So I'm mixed on a lot of things, but I was entertained. I'm going to give this volume a 7.5 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you all for watching. I'll be back in the future with some other comic videos. Right now, I'm just jumping to a whole bunch of random series over the next few weeks.